Alright, at number 5 we've got Legend of Dragoon. Legend of Dragoon was a game that was released very late into the PS1's lifespan, the original PS1. That I think it was 2000, maybe even 2001, I don't know. But it was basically made as a game to compete with Squaresoft with their flagship Final Fantasy series. Sony basically wanted to capture the kind of success that they had had with the 7, 8, and 9. So they got a development team together and they released Legend of Dragoon. And it was great. I loved it. It had an awesome story. A lot more original than the Final Fantasy stories, I will say that. These cool transformations that your character could do to do special spells called every character had a Dragoon form. Basically a badass dude with armor on and wings. How epic is that? But story and all that was cool, and then it had one thing the Final Fantasy series didn't have, and that was the Edition battle system. It was basically a timed button press battle system that right when you're getting ready to do an attack, the button that you needed to press would fly across the screen over a white box, and you had to press it right at the moment that it went over the white box. If you did that, it would add an extra hit to your attack. And some of the later editions are like 15, 16 different button presses. It gets kind of complicated to get a hold of, but once you do, it's amazing. At number 4 we have Parasite Eve 1 for the original PlayStation. Yet another game that was very original for its time. It was released by Squaresoft in, I think, 98, 99. But what was weird is it was an RPG, but it was a survival horror RPG, much different from their Final Fantasy series. Think of it as Resident Evil mixed with Final Fantasy almost. Its battle system was completely unique to the game. It had a AP points, action points system where as you're battling, this would fill up, and then once it was full, it would allow you to do an action. You would either attack with your equipped weapon, which was usually some kind of gun, let you use an item or use a spell. Another different thing about the battle system is actually, instead of being just a static screen where you take a turn, character runs up, attacks, you could actually move around, and you could do the unthinkable in a Square RPG, dodge attacks. Enough said. And at number 3, we have Fallout 3, the only Western RPG on my list. I'm not a huge fan of Western RPGs, but Fallout is a definite exception. It's a open world RPG, first-person shooter, if you want it to be. Takes place in a post-apocalyptic Washington, D.C. They call it the Wasteland in the game. The story is open-ended, multiple endings. Logan's flipping me off right now. Just thought I'd add that in. Anyway, it's a huge game. The world that it takes place in is basically a scale version of Washington, D.C. Huge game. That's just if you buy the regular edition. But if you get the Game of the Year edition or purchase all the downloadable content separately, the game would easily take you 200 to 300 hours just to scratch the surface. At number 2 we have Kingdom Hearts, or the Kingdom Hearts series rather. When this game was first announced back in 2000, I think is when they actually announced it, it was billed as a merger or combination of the Final Fantasy universe and the Disney universe. And when they announced this, everyone was like, "What the fuck? Why would we want to play something like that? That's fucking gay." And I was one of those people. I really thought that this game would be the gayest fucking thing I'd ever played. But then I actually got a hold of it when it released, and let me tell you, looks can be deceiving. The game is awesome. Love it. It's from its action-based battle system, which is really fun, easy to get into, addictive, to its bright, colorful worlds. Everything is completely unique to each other, to itself. You know, when you go to the Aladdin world, that's going to be completely different than when you go to the Alice in Wonderland world. But in a good way. Everything, it's awesome. The story is a bit over dramatic for my taste, but I still like it. There's really nothing about the game that I don't enjoy. And at number 1, I have probably the most controversial game I'm going to have on this list, and that's Final Fantasy VIII. And all of you are going to say, when you watch this, or not all, but most of you are going to say, this kid's fucking retarded, he's high, Final Fantasy VIII sucks, 7 so much better, 9 so much better, 10, 12, they're so much better, how could he pick Final Fantasy VIII? But that really is my favorite. The story is, it's basically just a love story between the two main characters, Squall and Rinoa, but they take this simple, just human emotion basically, and it expands and becomes this grand, just epic story, and you really haven't experienced anything like it until you play it. I think the main problem with the reason that the Final Fantasy fans were so down on this game when it came out is because the game previous to it was Final Fantasy VII, one of the greatest RPGs of all time. But it was a very traditional RPG, and then they threw everything out the window, and then they moved to Final Fantasy VIII. Now, yes, Final Fantasy VIII is still turn-based and everything else, but its battle system is completely different. They added what they call the junction system, which basically it treats magic as an item. There's no MP in the game, no magic points, no elixirs to refill them, no ethers to refill them. Your magic is an item that you would use just like a potion. The way you obtain them is there's these draw points around the world. You can draw them from them. There's different enemies. Different enemies carry different spells. You can draw them from them. Then you could also, your GFs will have abilities that you could actually take regular items that are basically useless to you and get magic spells out of them. For instance, at the beginning of the game, there's enemies that you can fight that will drop fish fins. They're not used for anything other than getting spells, and I think a couple of the weapons might use them. But you take a fish's fin and you'll get 5 to 10 water spells and stuff like that. And when you get these spells, they stack on top of each other. You can hold up to 100 of each spell, and you junction them to your stats. Every stat has its different place where you can junction to. So let's say you have strength. You can take a spell, and junction it to strength, and it'll increase how many strength points you have, depending on what spell. And different spells do better for different stats. As let's say you have a bunch of Curagas, those will do better on your HP stat than they do on your attack stat. Things like that. Damaging spells do better on your strength, attack, everything like that. And then the more life-giving spells do better on your defense and HP and everything like that. It does take a while to get used to. And I think a lot of people they got into this game, and the system, they didn't want to take the time, they were too lazy to learn it, or it just was too overwhelming for them, and they dismissed the game as a bad game. But once you actually are able to manipulate the system to the way you want it to, you can destroy all that cross your path. You can basically take a level 10 character and play throughout the game, not leveling up, just junctioning your stat, and destroy everything in your way. And some people say, oh, that's cheap, that makes the whole game easy. No, it's called strategy. If people were not so fucking lazy and they would have just given this game a chance, maybe they would have liked it. But, you know, that's the way we are. If we don't like something within 5 minutes, our attention span it's like a rodent. It just goes away. If we don't like it, just right away, it's not good and it's garbage. Or things change. We don't like changes of people in America. If something changes, it's nowhere near as good as the original. It can't be. But, you know, if people would have done that with Final Fantasy VII, we would all be singing a different tune. Look how different Final Fantasy VI is from Final Fantasy VII. I mean, it went to a different system completely. They went from 2D to 3D. There was like 17, 18 playable characters in Final Fantasy VI, and then there's like 8 in Final Fantasy VII. You know, how change can scare people that much, I don't get it. But needless to say, I think I'm ranting, but I like Final Fantasy VIII.